Last year, I accidentally became a disability advocate. I had applied to go to Sligo IT. I live in Ballyshannon, and the only way for me to travel up and down to the college was to take a bus. I'm a wheelchair user, so the problem arose that none of the buses on the route were wheelchair accessible. If this continued to be the case, I would not have been able to take my place in college. Through investigation, I discovered that this wasn't a one-off just affecting wheelchair users in the Ballyshannon area, that it was widespread across the nation, especially in rural Ireland. So I started a national campaign to get all routes in the country with accessible buses, and not just for wheelchair users, but for the visually and the hearing impaired as well. I started giving interviews on Highland Radio and Ocean FM. News Talk ran a competition where you could get to take home a TD for the day, and had Martin Kenny, who came to Ballyshannon and met me, where I was able to raise the issue of the lack of accessible buses and also accessibility within the town itself. I started the campaign in February of last year. I shared my post on social media, creating a poll to get calling on the government and the Department of Transport to allocate accessible buses across the country, in particular for Route 480 from Ballyshannon to Sligo, as that was my route that I needed to get to go to college, but also highlighting the need for accessible transport nationwide. Senator John Dolan at the time about my need to have an accessible bus to go to college in the Shannon, which was met by support. Martin Kenny and Breach Smith both raised the issue with Minister Shane Ross, and then Senator John Dolan invited me up to speak on the community participation bill, on the part that included the need for all buses, whether they were public or private, to be accessible for everybody in the country. So I was able to speak to both TDs and senators about the real need and necessity of being able to get a bus, having the freedom to travel, just like everybody else. I collected over 10,000 signatures, both through social media and being out in my local community collecting physical signatures. These signatures I handed over to Minister Shane Ross. I also raised the issue that a lot of people with disabilities don't speak out. They're afraid if they point out a problem or something that they're being denied, that they will lose the basic services they're already getting. Carers of people with disabilities don't have the time to go and protest. There are a lot of very good disability advocates in the country, and we are trying to be the voice for the people that are afraid to speak out themselves or just don't have the time. In September of last year, I met with the CEO and management team from Bus Éireann for the launch of the 480 new wheelchair accessible bus, where I was able to advocate for more buses. They gave me the good news that 100 buses were going to be allocated in 2020 across Ireland that would be accessible for all people. In October 2019, following my successful campaign for wheelchair accessible buses in Ireland, I decided I would like to attend the Freedom Drive in Brussels from the European Network of Independent Living, in which wheelchair users and people with disabilities from across Europe all come together and meet with MEPs to advocate for the rights, the needs, equality and inclusion of all people with disabilities. I was the only Irish representative to go to Brussels during the Freedom Drive. I had the full support of IT Sligo, Bus Éireann, Donegal Centre for Independent Living Movement Ireland, and also attained sponsorship from Matt Carthy, Sinn Féin, who sponsored my flights and accommodation for myself and my carer. I was in the European Parliament and I was able to advocate on transport access to education, equality, inclusion, and also raised the issue with them that MEPs in Europe should not be making new laws without holding consultations with people with disabilities beforehand. For instance, the European Parliament has voted to ban plastic straws. This has caused an outcry amongst severely physically disabled people in Ireland who rely on plastic straws to take drinks. If you're looking at paper straws, they dissolve. Metal straws, if you're consuming hot liquids, burn the mouth. Plastic straws are what work, but no consultation has been done. I returned to Brussels to the European Commission to celebrate the Day of Persons with Disabilities. I was able to speak both days of the event and raise the issue to grassroots investment and funding for children with disabilities, for more funding for transport, to sporting events, to facilities that cater for people with disabilities. So it's been a whirlwind of a journey. COVID-19 has impacted advocating. We're limited on where we can go, the number of people we can meet, but that nobody's left behind. I'm still here, I'm still advocating, and that is my mission now in life, is to work towards a truly inclusive and accessible country for everybody.